back to Where in the World, where we have real conversations with young professionals about life and career, all while attempting to guess where in the world they are. We'll learn something new about our guests and what it's like to forge your own career path as a young professional. And when we say young, we're really talking about a state of mind. You'll learn by watching this web series that your career will take many dips and turns over time. And just when you think you've made it, you might have to scrap it all and start from scratch. Sometimes that's just the way it goes, and we ride the tide. I'm your host, Clary Johnson. Happy Juneteenth. I know we're a couple days or one day away from Juneteenth. So I'm really excited to be here today. In this Juneteenth attire. And we're going to go to some really cool places today. But before we get into that, I just want to pause to say a thank you to everyone who has supported the show up until this point. We are on the final episode of this pilot season, and the biggest takeaway that I've learned from this season is that the ideas of career and success are like a thumbprint, unique to everyone's experiences and perceptions. Today, we are joined by Chinwe Ohanele, founder of Ohanele Law Firm and senior program manager at Michelson Philanthropies. As an attorney, Chinwe helps clients minimize their legal risks. Most recently, she's applied her thought leadership to advance the intellectual property initiative at Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property. The big, hairy question we're asking today is, how can young professionals pivot in their careers even when they don't know what's on the other side? But before we get started, let's do some housekeeping. This is a mini web series game show. The questions will range from standard like interview questions to more personal questions about our guests' careers. You'll notice we're both here today with different backgrounds. In between questions, we'll have an opportunity to guess where in the world the other person is. And the first person to guess correctly wins. Our guests can ask for clues along the way, and our audience can also chip in and help out by also asking for clues in the chat. So please join me in welcoming Chinwe. Before we can continue, Chinwe, did I pronounce your name correctly?
Close. Chinwe
Okay.
Ohanele.
Okay. Chinwe Ohanele. All right. So Chinwe, this interview is a long time coming, but it's right on time. I recently took a few weeks off from the show and really from life itself. I found myself in a space where I was really feeling anxious about the outlook of my business, and I was trying to fix something that I thought was broken, and nothing I did seemed to be working. I finally decided to pause, take a break, and relax in the moment. And I'm glad I did, because I have so much more clarity now than I did before about how to move forward in my business and in my life. So today, we're connecting at a time in your life where you've experienced a lot of changes in a short period of time. Over the past few months, you've taken on a new role, you've moved into a new home, you've restructured your business. And when we talked about what's coming up for you, the word rest stood out for me. I don't think we talk about resting enough, especially when our lives feel topsy turvy. So let's talk about rest tonight, beginning with our most common interview question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background.
Well, thank you, Clary, for inviting me on. It is very timely, this discussion. I have been feeling and thinking about rest a lot lately. But in terms of my background and sort of how I got to where I am, I'm a licensed attorney, licensed in California, New York, and New Jersey. I've been practicing for 9 years. Don't let the baby face fool you. I've been around for a while. Um, I went to school here in Southern California for law school. Um, pretty much lived in California most of my life, so I am as close to a Cali girl as you can get. But before California, I was born in Nigeria, so I'm an immigrant. I'm the oldest of five siblings, and so things like responsibility or and type A-ness go together. And yeah, so pretty much been a lawyer for a very long time, and then recently added a new position at the Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property as the senior program manager, which is a very new skill set that I'm sort of delving into, and is a bit of an adventure. And Yeah, there's a lot of newness to this season, and I'm also an adjunct professor at USC Gold Law School, so wearing a lot of hats and definitely in a huge transitional season of life, because a lot of these things are coming up in the last year, 2 years, 6 months, so everything's feeling very, very fresh and new. So yeah, that I think that's a great place for me to sort of stop, and we can go from there.
Yeah, what I really liked about what you just said is when you were talking about these new skill sets that you're taking on as a program manager, and you described it as an adventure. And that's really potent for me because I think sometimes when we're stepping into new roles or we're stretching our muscles or we're learning something new, we look at those opportunities, or at least I know I can only speak for myself. Sometimes I look at that, I'm like, this is a challenge, but to reframe your thinking and to really look at it and say, this is an adventure, this is an exploration, like this is a moment of curiosity for me to really be able to explore and uncover what I'm capable of and what I really enjoy doing and what I'm good at. And so I really admire that about how you framed your experience because it can be a lot, right? Like you're a professor, you run a business, you are working as a program manager. Those are tons of hats in different areas of your lives that require a high level of expertise. They require a high level of attention to detail. And so to be able to really manage yourself in a way that you can do all of those things, um, I admire you. And I would just say, definitely, definitely, definitely in this time, this is when I say, how am I refilling my cup? Because I'm pouring out so much, right? Like I'm doing so much. And in all these different areas for these different organizations, for these different relationships, right? Because those are relationships that you're fostering in those different environments, that we have to fill ourselves back up. We have to fill our own cup. So I'm really looking forward to diving a little bit deeper into the topic today. But before we do, I want to pause and guess where you are because you are on a beach. I will say 90% of all the background on this show have been near a body of water, which I love because I love water. Um, so you're on a beach somewhere. Let me just describe this for our podcast listeners who may not necessarily be watching but might be listening. And so there is a very blue sky, like blue. I mean, there are some wispy clouds in the sky, so it's not a totally clear sky. But they're not those cumulonimbus clouds. I did a little bit of like I my background is in broadcast journalism, so one of my favorite classes in undergrad was meteorology, and where we learned different clouds. So it's not a cumulonimbus cloud because those are rain clouds. They're very wispy clouds. I don't remember what those are called. Um, and then we have this ocean on my right side, on Chinwe's left hand side, that's just swooping in. But it's a very like straight ocean, a straight coastline, which
Hmm.
is interesting to me. It looks like there might be some okay, so there are palm trees. There's just tons of palm trees on the left, and they're alive. So this is not California. Um, this is not California. because those palm trees look like they're really thriving. And in the background, I can see it looks like there might be like a mountain range towards the background. I can't tell if that's just some clouds building up, but it looks like a mountain range. So, all of that to say, I'm just gonna go with my gut and say the Bahamas.
No, but you're right that it's not the US.
Okay. So give me a clue about this place.
Um, it is, hmm, what's a clue that won't give it away immediately? It's near the equator.
Oh, I like that clue. Okay, awesome. All right, okay, so it's your turn.
Okay, so I was looking at this background before. There's a poster, electric light. I can't tell who that person is on the poster, but it looks very scientific. There's like four pictures, and of course, my eyesight is failing me now. There's a sphere. One of the pictures is a sphere over what looks like an inkwell. Um,
Oh,
I don't know if that's the
that's real
only.
specific.
And it's next to another picture of a rectangular figure that looks either like an old timey like radio box or like a fancy perfume bottle. But yeah, I can't really make out what the pictures above are, but there's a window that looks out to the forest. Another, oh, Edison.
Oh,
Edison. Okay, I see Edison on the poster. Edison is from the East Coast. So, and there's a rocking chair. Is this Edison's home?
Y- I should have known I was going to get in trouble inviting a lawyer, an attorney onto the show. So, we're not quite in Edison's home. However, I'm going to give you your first clue about this place.
Okay.
The person who lived here was an inventor and a scientist who helped develop the electric light bulb.
It's a black person. It's the black
Okay,
guy
now
who.
pause.
Oh man, I don't know his name. I know this piece of trivia.
Okay,
I
next
know the story.
question.
Okay, next question. Sorry.
I tell you, we invite some brilliant people on this show, okay? Okay, so let's move on to our next question. Okay. How are you finding balance as the operator of a business while also working in your industry as a program manager?
Okay. So I'm gonna try to make this not a long-winded question answer, but I don't know that there's such a thing as balance. I think that there are priorities, and maybe those priorities shift day to day. Um, I couldn't say that there's a precise formula because I think anyone who runs a business knows um, a fire could happen at any point in time, day or night, whether you're tired, got all the energy, you're broke, you got all the money. Like it doesn't matter. Your business does not care. Your business is, it's not a human being, but it's very much like a child. Like it doesn't care. It does what it does, and you just have to respond. So, um, there's no balance. I think um, the word you have to really get comfortable with is grace and giving yourself grace because you just can't do all the things. Um, So like this, I've been laughing with one of my colleagues about my calendar because I literally had like 10 meetings yesterday, 10 meetings today, and I think tomorrow she was like, your calendar looks disgusting. And I was like, I know, I'm aware. I get tired looking at it.
You're like,
Um,
just looking at it, I'm exhausted.
tired. And it's one of those things that I've been working on because you can't do all these things if you don't have some kind of strategy for time management because you do have to find time to actually do these things. And now in the age of, our COVID, post-COVID world, we're doing a lot of Zoom meetings. Like everybody is just like, oh, we don't have to meet in person. Let me just get on your calendar. And then all of a sudden your calendar looks like some child with a crayon box just like colored all over it because you got meetings everywhere, you know. You're just like, please stop doing it, no more, and so part of it is implementing sort of boundaries for yourself. So one boundary that I'm going to test out and see how it goes, that actually a life coach that I'm working with suggested, because I travel a lot for work as well. I have trouble with re entering my life. So it's kind of like you go up to space. It's really exciting. You're just like shooting off into space. You experience all this stuff, and then you got to come back to Earth, and gravity hits you like, bam. Re entry into life after a trip like that feels a lot like, re entry into, gravity. So the strategy that I'm implementing now is no meetings at least the day or two after I come back. That gives me the breathing room to sort of catch up on what I've missed, do any follow up, any contacting, reaching out, follow, all of that. It needs mind, space, and time. And so it's really just thinking about how do you like to work? What works for you in terms of, when during the day you like to work, things like that. And then also just being mindful, like you're a human being and there's some days you're gonna have a lot of energy and some days you're just gonna be like, no, and it's a no today. And you need to learn how to respect that. And then when you can't do it, just give yourself grace, like hopefully tomorrow you can do more. But yeah, that's been my thing. I don't think they're balanced. There's no such thing. It's a lie.
Man, everything you said just spoke so deeply to my spirit. Particularly the part about your calendar looking like a crayon box, because anyone who's seen my calendar is like, "What? It looks like I'm speaking in a foreign language in my calendar," and they're like, "I don't know what this says." I'm like, "I know everything is color coded," but surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly. I also, with all of my color coding and my crayons, I am setting boundaries on my calendar. So, one boundary that I recently set is not having any meetings before 10 a.m. So, my 10 a.m., right? For a lot of people, that's late. It doesn't mean I wake up at 10 a.m., y'all. It just means I'm not talking to you before 10 a.m. Okay.
That that part.
Like I might wake up at 7 a.m. I love trading stocks, so the bell rings at 8:30 a.m. Central Time. So I'm up well before that looking at charts. I may not necessarily be out of bed at that point, but maybe I'll just be up looking at the charts around 6, 7. Then I might even take a little nap, a siesta for 30 minutes, and then wake up, shower, get fresh, ready for the day, do a little bit of trading, and then by the time we're like almost midway through the trading day, and 11 a.m. is about midway, um, then at that point, I'm ready to start taking meetings. And because what you're saying is right, now in this post COVID world where we're all so used to just hopping on a video call, it's really easy to say, well, we that's time you're not spending that time in traffic, you're not spending that time, walking down the hall to the bathroom or chatting it up with Kathy and, the break room, like, so it's tempting to say, well, I can just do all of these meetings back to back to back. And
Right.
what you find is you get really tired after a string of Zoom calls, and you're
Hmm.
wondering why, because you're like, I'm just sitting here staring at a computer. Like, why am I exhausted? And it's because you're still working, like, you're still
Exactly.
attentive. And on top of that, you're switching, right? Like every meeting, you're code switching, right? So one meeting, I am talking about strategy, and next minute meeting, I'm talking about design, another meeting, I'm talking about social media, another, and it just gets, it's that transitional period. So building in some time in between meetings is also a really great way to break up the day, to slow things down, give yourself time to take care of yourself mentally before you step into that next interaction, that next conversation, that next relationship, right? So,
Yeah.
that was kind of really stuck out to me. Um, but I'm looking at your background right now, and it's just bringing so much calm to the stress that was starting to build up as I was just thinking about thinking about the calendar. Looking at your background is really helping to soothe that feeling of stress and anxiety that's starting to churn up. Um, and it's so much so that I need to know where we are. So we are on the equator, or we're near the equator.
Hmm.
Okay. Um, am I safe to say this is an island?
No.
Oh, I'm not safe to say this is an island. Okay. Um, let me just choose a country. Are we in South America?
No.
We're not in South America. Oh, okay. That narrows it down for me. We're near the
Hmm.
equator and we're not in South America. Okay. I have a couple more ideas. But
Do you want another hint?
yeah, actually, that would be helpful.
Um, Yam, not the sweet potato yam, but the cassava type yam is very popular here. That probably gave it away.
It narrowed it down quite a bit.
Okay.
It was that was gonna be my next guess, but now I think I can be a little bit more intentional about my guess.
Okay.
Um, can I ask a question?
Hmm.
There is a Netflix show. I don't even remember the name of the show, but it's a really good show. It's either a series or like a mini film. I want to say it's a series of a black man who is traveling in Africa, and he's it's like it's a he is going
Is
to
it
these.
food? Is it food related?
Yes, it's food
It's
related.
high on the hog.
Yes, 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 yes. You've seen that show slash film. Okay. Um, is that is this place in that documentary?
No,
Oh, it's not.
which is low key annoying, but no.
Okay. That's helpful as well. Okay. Your turn.
Um, is this the home of Lewis Latimer?
Yes, it is. I had so many more good clues to offer. You know what? I'm not giving up. I'm going to give you some more. I'm going to give you a rundown of Lewis Latimer, who is really an amazing person, right? Like everyone
Yeah.
thinks of the light bulb and they think Thomas Edison immediately. There's a black man, guys, who helped develop the electric light bulb. He was also an artist and an expert on the laws that cover inventions, which is why I chose this one. Um, he learned mechanical drawing while working for a Boston patent attorney, which is why I was really impressed that you pointed out that that was an inkwell. And this is his home. This home is located in Queens, New York, and it's located at the 34 to 41st. 137th Street in Flushing, Queens, New York City.
Interesting.
Specifically, it was constructed in the Queen Anne style of architecture between 1887 and 1889 by the Sexton family. After the war, Latimer went to work as an office boy for a law firm in Boston. The firm worked on patents. A patent is an official document that gives an inventor control over who may use their invention. And Chinwe, I know you know a lot about this. So,
Yep. And actually, what's interesting is that the lawyer that he worked for is also Alexander Graham Bell, who was also a well known inventor and scientist. So, which was very interesting
man,
because I didn't even know that Alexander Bell had a patent law firm. I just thought he was an inventor. So,
wow.
there you go.
And so that's pretty incredible to think about law and creativity going together in this way. Because I mean, that speaks a lot about what you do is you're really helping people to protect the things that they create and things that they invent and come up with, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's really cool. So, um, cheers. I mean, bravo to you for getting that on basically the first try. Because honestly, I think you probably would have guessed it on the first try, but we had to pace you. With that being said, we're going to move on to our next question, which is before this interview, you talked about pivoting in your identity as a practitioner to become a practitioner scholar. For you, what is the distinction between being an educator or a practitioner in your field and being a student or a scholar?
Um, yeah, I think that's a good question. So, um, for context or for a little bit of background, my undergraduate degrees are in economics and philosophy. And for people, that is like weird because it's like left brain, right brain. But for me, I think I was just a really curious student who wanted to know more about the world and to be able to look at it from different lenses. So when I started practicing, I went into private practice. I wasn't really doing anything novel or unique. I was just kind of like, look, I got this degree, I got this license, let me go make some money. And I was working for a while, representing insurance companies doing litigation. And while I was doing that work, I got involved in a couple of different volunteer opportunities where I got to interact with tech founders who are coming from West Africa. And it was the first time that I was sort of put in a different environment where my legal expertise was still valuable. So that I got a lot of questions about entity formation and ownership and protection. And, I think I took for granted that business owners would have all of these questions. I think I assumed that if you're a business owner, you probably know all this stuff. You don't need any of my help. But I found it was the opposite. And so that was sort of me moving from practitioner to more of a advisor consultant. And then I think that as time went on and I started to learn a little bit more about like the intellectual property ecosystem on the continent of Africa and how it's different and it's evolving in a different rate than the US, I my curiosity took over and I started reading about, the bills and what has been causing some of the delays and the different entities or organizations or institutional entities that are sort of key in some of the negotiations and things like that. And that curiosity led to um, first launching a comic book convention in Nigeria in
Oh,
2018, which was a wild experience. Um, Story for another day. But it's like you get on the ground and you see the realities of the laws. Um, I think that for me, the law is a very interesting force because it acts on you without you realizing it.
mhm.
So, people will do things people will not do things because they know that it's illegal, right? And so over time, you don't have the actual thought, this is illegal, I don't do it. You just don't do it. So, another example is like the Jim Crow laws. So, in the South, right, you have these laws that say you can't drink out of this water fountain, you can't use this bathroom. And then when the laws are repealed or removed, people will still act the way that the laws told them to act out
Mhm.
of fear because everyone is used to acting that way. And so the law can be a very powerful force that changes human behavior. And so, I started to think about for creators, for innovators, for entrepreneurs of various backgrounds, how is the law um, sort of invisibly acting on us to either pursue our passions, to succeed, to nurture the ecosystem, or to not. And I think that curiosity is what led to, the work that I'm doing at Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property, the work that I was doing on my blog, the content biz, where I'm looking at how governments or private sector are really driving economic growth in different countries through their creative and cultural industries. So, for me, I feel like you can stay at the practitioner counselor stage, which is very like one to one. But as you move further towards sort of like the scholar, you're looking at the macro level. You're
Mhm.
looking at like, the big community, right? Whether it's a state, a city, a country, a region, and you're really thinking about, what are those macro changes or shifts or movements that can sort of push society in one direction or another. And so I think it's a unique position to be in as a lawyer because we're dealing with people every day one on one, and we can actually see the reality of some of the changes that happen in the law and how it impacts people's behavior and how we're able to support our clients. And then we can zoom all the way back and think about, okay, this positive experience that we had here, how can we replicate it from a policy standpoint? And so those are kind of the differences I see, but I think that it's a little harder to be a student and scholar because you got to carve out that time yourself. There's
True.
unless you're in academia, you're in a PhD program or a master's program, you got to find that time and find the access and the resources because you're not going to find like journal articles just sitting on the internet. So thankfully, because I'm faculty at USC, I have access to a lot of those articles. And trust me when I say I go through like a kid in a candy store. The other day I was just pulling articles. I was like, oh, this looks interesting. Oh, this looks interesting. And then you have to take time to sort of digest it and think about the materials that you've sort of read and say, what other story is this information telling, or what other context can you put around this information, or how else can you apply this to a novel scenario. So it feels very much left brain right brain again, like the philosophical part of me that sort of likes these maybe gray topics and really wrestling with them and trying to figure out how do we address this, how do we think about intellectual property as social justice, how do we leverage IP to drive economic development and generational wealth for underserved and underrepresented communities, right? Those are sort of like macro nebulous. There's a million different answers to the one question, but then practice is very, economics. Like these are the things I can do for you. These are the registrations I can file for you. These are the business formation options you have, and we can go ahead and do that. So yeah, I think that's honestly just explaining it now. If I finally understand what the heck I'm doing.
And that is the power of Socratic dialogue, my friends. So there was so much juicy goodness packed in that answer. And my mind was just going at a million miles an hour. I was like, yes, yes. The first thing I thought about is when you were talking about business owners, you have this kind of expectation that if they're running a business, they have this awareness of like what's available to them as far as the law is concerned, or the pitfalls that we need to be watching out for. And the reality is like, no, that is not common knowledge, even for myself. as a creator, kind of walking into that territory and really thinking about intellectual property and thinking about your brand and how protecting that brand is so vital to also protecting the credibility and the reputation of your company.
Right.
Um, just how simple a copyright or a trademark, like how far that can really go in
Mhm.
protecting you as a business, your business. So that was one thing that really stuck out to me. And then when you were talking about the Crow laws, thank you for bringing that perspective to the show, because I hadn't really considered how the law really uh, impacts or changes human behavior. And to hear you describe it that way, I had this kind of light bulb moment like, whoa, that's true. And I had a kind of a question as well, about the question that came up for me is, are people really fearful of the law, or are they fearful of um, the the consequences, the outcomes of breaking the law or not following the law, or like it. But then when you were saying that even when the law does no longer exist, people still behave the same way that they behaved when the law was in place, when those consequences did exist. And so thinking about how it really it's human behavior, but it's also, there's an emotional elements to that as well, and a psychological
Yeah.
element that I think. And the reality is, think about it this way, if I have this fear, and I'm living with this fear, and I have children, well, a lot of the philosophies and a lot of things that I'm going to teach my children are going to be from that place of, here's what I was fearful of. This is
Right.
how I protected myself. Because one of the first
Right.
things you teach your kids is protection, right? I mean, I don't have any children, but I imagine that would be really important in rearing a child. And
Mhm.
so it makes so much sense of why it's so difficult then to really penetrate and like persuade and like help and like remold people's ways of thinking, because so much of it is rooted in, well, I don't do this because there's this consequence, right?
Right.
Or I have to behave this way in order to get this specific kind of outcome.
Right.
So much of the way we live is based off of our perceptions of right and wrong, our perceptions of good and bad, our perceptions of danger and safety. And so when we talk a lot about politics, so much of that is ingrained in our psyche that it becomes really difficult when you're having conversations about like really helping people see different perspectives of different issues. Or even yourself taking a step back of myself. I mean, I consider myself to be a little bit more malleable when it comes to seeing different ideas, but that could be my own false self perception. But like, thinking of myself and my own biases and my own belief systems and how challenging and difficult it can be to change beliefs about things, right? Because it's so ingrained emotionally. I know it's really long-winded, but that was really deep for me. And it touched on so much. And when I bring that back to career, I think it's really relevant because when we talk about the behaviors that we want to bring to the table, where whether we're interviewing, whether we're in a workplace, right? Like, so much of it is, again, going back to relationships, is going back to communication. But a lot of career mobility, I would say from my experience, has been politics.
Mhm.
And it's been a lot about, well, what is the culture of the space that I'm operating within? How well do I understand the culture? And then how can I influence, right? Or how can I be persuasive in this environment to really make strides in advance? Um, and so I think understanding, like, what I've learned working in different work environments is that each place, in addition to have their own culture, they have kind of their own rules and their own laws and
Mhm.
ways of operating. And you kind of have to really understand how to move within those environments to be able to be successful in them,
Mhm.
much like in the real world and in life. So, um, That brings me to your background. Um, so we're definitely in Africa.
Yep.
Okay. I'm like, give me something. Okay. So we said that um yams are very popular here, and we're near the equator. Now, when you said near
Mhm.
the equator, I didn't know how close or far we are from the equator, but I'm going to guess that we're closer rather than farther. You also mentioned that this is not a place that was in the Netflix mini web series High on the Hog. Um, so I'm gonna guess that we're in Ethiopia.
Mm-mm. Wrong coast.
Broncos. Oh, that's helpful. Okay. Well, okay. I was gonna go with the next guess, but I feel like that was too obvious. But I think I have to. I think I just have to guess it next time around. Cool. Awesome. So, okay. So young professionals get a bad rap for not staying in one place for too long. So here are a few statistics. I'm going to share them. The yearly turnover rate for the millennial workforce is 21%, which costs business $30.5 billion annually. That's according to Gallup. According to Zippia, the median tenure for millennials ages 25 to 34 was 2.8 years. And from CNBC, research on millennials in the workplace in 2022 revealed that they are three times more likely to change jobs in a year than their elders. And finally, also according to CNBC, 25% of millennials and 33% of Gen Z accounted for more than 50% of job hopping in 2022. What's your take on these numbers? That was a lot of statistics, but
So I smile because I'm probably a great example of the job hopper, unfortunately. And it's wild because I don't know that I saw it that way at the time. Like I said, I came out of law school thinking I'm just going to stay in one place, and I do think that most lawyers do, stay, regardless of whether they're millennial or not. They tend to stay, 2 to 3 years, sometimes, as much as 5 years, because for lawyers you're looking for tenure and you're looking for partner track, and so you only get that by staying in a place long enough to sort of gain your stripes, if you will. And then when you move to another firm, you lateral over and you sort of stay at that level before you prove yourself at the new firm and then you start to move up. So for most lawyers, we don't really hop around that much. But I would say that for me, I think I ended up hopping around inadvertently, chasing purpose, which I ended up finding by starting my practice, ironically. Um, I was making good money working, in private practice. I was working in, statewide law firms. They weren't sort of like gigantic nationwide, but I mean, it's the state of California, so these are pretty big firms. Upwards of 50 attorneys. I guess they would call that mid-size. Um, and, six figures. But I really felt like if human beings use 20% of their brain, like, for life, I felt like I was using like 0.5%.
hmm.
No shade to like my employers or the area of work I was doing, but I just didn't feel like I was really like using my full potential. And what ended up happening was I was moving to get closer to my volunteer opportunities. So, like, I started in Fresno, which is the middle. For those who don't know anything about California, the middle of the state is Fresno, and there's nothing there. It's a very small, insular community, lots of farming, agriculture, great friendly people, but it's not a metropolitan area.
Mhm.
So that means that a lot of the sort of cultural activities, anything to do with Africa, it just wasn't coming through Fresno. So you either go north or you go south. So if you go north, you're going to the Bay Area. You go south, you go to Los Angeles. And at the time, I was like, well, I grew up in the East Bay. I have relationships in the Bay Area. So I took a shot and I moved up to San Jose. And, I was like, I'll stay here for a while. And it was a significant pay bump for me to go to the Bay Area. But what ended up happening? Like, I was there for a year and then I quit to go do my comic book convention because I knew they weren't going to let me leave for 3 months. And so I was like, all right, bye. And then, you come back. I was there for a year. You come back, and there's another firm that had sort of seen me in action at court and had said, "Hey, if you're ever looking for a position, you can come work for us." And so when I came back, that's where I went. And at that point, I was starting to realize that I wanted to make a transition from that work to transactional work and more intellectual property entertainment, but it's Northern California. That's not where the market is. And so I was like, okay, chasing the market, I'm going to move to LA. Again, I've only been there a year. Oh, well, I got a job in LA. Then COVID happened.
Hmm.
And at that point, I was the feeling of sort of the lack of fulfillment, that feeling was catching up with me. It was harder and harder to sort of ignore that I'm spending, you know, 60, 70, 80 hours a day doing work that I absolutely loathe. And then I would use the remaining time that I had to do like all this other stuff that brought me excitement and joy and all of that. And like, I think a lot of people had sort of come to Jesus moments during COVID. And mine was Thanksgiving. I was at Thanksgiving with my family, and like more than half of my family is in the healthcare industry. My brother and I are the only two who are just sort of like off on our own doing our thing. He's an engineer, I'm a lawyer. And I was telling my siblings, I was like, you guys are so lucky. You get out of school, mom and dad are in healthcare, and they've worked in the top hospitals in this country. They just got to put in a phone call and you got a job. I'm like, we don't have that situation. And my dad looks at me and he was like, do you want to start your own law firm? And I was like,
Hmm.
are you serious? Meanwhile, this is like, my dad is all about stability, pensions, 401ks, IRAs, Roth IRAs, like put in your time. This is a man that's worked, 20 plus years, 15 plus years in a company. And he was like, well, if you want to start a law firm, then let's talk about it.
Hmm.
And like, my dad is an immigrant. So, stability and just, it's not, at least from their perspective, right? When you're a professional, you get a job.
Yeah.
So I was very surprised, but they were dead serious, and that's literally how I started my firm. So I think that sometimes when you look at millennials and you look at Gen Zs, you're looking at a crop of people who have watched at least one generation just sort of like stay the course and live that life, put in the 20, 30 years, and at the end of the day, some of those people, they get fired,
Yeah.
they don't, they leave, and it's like, okay, thanks, we're moving on to somebody else. The loyalty doesn't go both ways.
Hmm.
And I think that in, and I'll also say this, as a employer now, I can understand the employer's perspective. Like, man, if somebody leaves, I got to bring somebody in. But I think this is the first time it's almost like somewhat of a balanced seesaw, because that thing can swing either way,
Right.
um at will employment is a real thing in both directions.
Yeah.
That contract says either person can say they want to go, and I think we're just so used to the employer being the one to say, hey, we gotta let you go, that it's odd for so many people to just be like, this isn't working for me. So I would say that it it can be jarring because you have a lot of systems that have been built on sort of like loyalty and employee loyalty, and sort of this expectation that people should stay in a place because of all the benefits. But I do think that this is going to require employers to really think thoughtfully about the cultures that they're building and if people are truly a fit. I mean, Michelson Institute for Intellectual Property is a great example. We're an initiative within 20 Million Minds, which is the true company that houses our initiative. And I remember the first time I went to the office and I was like, y'all really belong here, like all of you. It was very clear that you people who work here, you your
You're right.
recruitment was a good, yeah, exactly. Like whoever's doing your recruitment's doing a good job. And I think that's what people want to see. I think if you enter a space that you feel like your contributions are making a difference, that you are able to, move things forward, or just go in and feel good about the work that you're doing, right? Your employer is sort of meeting you where you are. I think that more people would be willing to stay a bit longer. But if you are just sort of like, hey, I'm cutting you a check every 2 weeks, I think that there's the generations that appreciated that are aren't these two generations. And it might just be because, we didn't live through like World War, whatever. Like our level of survival is not that, you know what I mean?
Mhm,
It's a
mhm,
little different.
mhm,
And I think maybe because we grew up in one of the longest economic booms in history, it just set a different tone. And I think that people can't forget that every generation is marked by the things that happened within it. And yes, we did have, 9/11 and all that happened there, but I don't know that that really was able to counterbalance the amount of just economic growth that the US has had over the last like 20 years. So something comes with that, right? The belief that I can find an opportunity somewhere else, or I can create an opportunity if you won't give it to me. And it's going to change culture, and that's where we're headed. So
Man, m I swear, you have a soundbite every 5 seconds. Just like, yes. I could literally just listen to talk all day. Um, I mean, and what you're saying is so true. I can see this in my own life of having this idea, kind of drilled into your head as a child in high school or as a kid or in high school, um, as a black kid, like go to college or go to the military or be homeless. Like those are your three options. Those are the three options I was given. And college was one of those things that was just pushed in school constantly. College, 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 college. Stay in school, go to college, because it really, at least for my community, was seen as kind of a way out. It was seen as a way to success. It was seen as the
mhm,
path. And so there's also this expectation, I think, from young professionals of, well, if I follow this path and I do everything right and I go to college and I go get my master's degree and then I go get the job, that, I'm going to be good. Like I'm going to be at least wealthy enough that I don't have to worry about checking my pocketbook when I walk into a grocery store. Right.
mhm,
And the reality is, I think what COVID showed is that so, well, even before COVID, was that so much of that was just an illusion, and so much was omitted from that story. And I think a lot was omitted because people hadn't had the kind of experience with student loan debt. I mean, yes, many of previous generations have lots and lots of student loan debt, but we young professionals own a large chunk of that.
yeah,
And we're doing this without having the same kind of access to um those steady job opportunities. I think the tech industry was seen as the different, right? Like you go in tech industry, you're making six figures, you're getting to work in some of the biggest, juiciest cities in the country. You're young, you're thriving, you're working with other brilliant people. And then
mhm,
COVID was like the rug snatch, right? It is like, yeah, and also this is not as stable as you thought it was, right? I should have said post-COVID was the rug snap. This isn't
Yeah.
as stable as you thought it was. And so really getting creative about, well, how do I make a living for myself that's not totally dependent on this system? How do we create a new system? And I think companies like Uber have helped that, right? Because people are like, well, I can just take my car and I can go do some grocery shopping for someone. I can go Uber eating. I can go even heck the Apple store. I can go and like pick up, some products and deliver them and makes a quick buck and be able to put
Mhm.
food on the table at night and be able to fill my gas tank and be able to pay my electric bill. And that's
Yeah.
just going to, help me get by. Or, whoa, I actually really like this and I can create my own business from this, right? I can do my own thing. And so we have this maker economy, right? We have companies like Pinterest, right? Where you can DIY things, and you have Etsy where you can sell those DIY things. And there are all of these opportunities now where you can kind of create your own reality of your own lifestyle and what you want to do. And that's exactly what I'm doing. So it's funny that we're in this space because um, I just signed an apartment lease.
Yay.
It's been 3 years. I've been living with my mom and, finally being able to step out on my own. I'm nervous as heck. But, this is opening up so much for me because I'm like, "Okay, I would love to teach. Let's explore the adjunct professor route, right? Teaching digital marketing or how to develop digital products in schools.
Mhm.
Um, well, I love trading. I can do that too and make some money online. I like selling things. I think might be actually pretty good at it. I can start my own eBay account or Amazon account or Poshmark, and I can sell clothes that I haven't worn in years as I'm going through this transition, make some a little bit of money. And all of these ideas of just how to create wealth are springing up, and the reality is like I can go in any direction that I want. And so I think what you're saying is so true is that we're kind of entering this new era where the old systems and structures and beliefs about career and what it means to live and work are changing. And they're being replaced by new brilliant ideas and new brilliant ways of being. And I'm excited to be living through this time. Okay, so we are in Nigeria.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I just had to
Mhm.
get that out. I've been holding it in this entire time. And I just had to say that. Okay, so we're in Nigeria. Tell me exactly where we are.
This is Ilashe Beach. It's in Lagos, and some of my so it's not necessarily the best beaches because Lagos is like hugely populated, but there are sort of these pockets that you'll find. Really nice place to just like lay out and be lazy for a while. So this is one of those beaches. And the last time I was, oh, it's been a minute. I would say 2019 is the last time I went to a beach. And a friend of mine took me to this beach that I didn't even know was like there. We drove really far into the boonies, and all of a sudden you see like this clear water, completely secluded. Nobody was there, and it was really early in the morning too. It was just really great to just like hang out and
Uh,
listen to the water. And so, yeah, so Lagos, Nigeria, major metropolitan area, quite cosmopolitan, lots of people flying in and out from all over the world. Major sort of like one of the biggest cities in Nigeria, next to the capital, which is Abuja. But yeah, I'm from the east, so our biggest city would be Owerri. But Lagos is the one that everyone would know and is right on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. So
yes, and a place I must visit. Um,
yes,
Africa has been on my list of places to visit for a long time, but Africa is so big. I want to go to Egypt. I want to go to Zambia. I want to go to Mozambique. I want to go to. I mean, there are lots of different places. Nigeria,
Exactly.
Ethiopia,
It's
and
huge.
so there's no way, unless I move there, that I'd be able to visit all those places in one trip. But um, multiple trips, you know. Okay, so we're here at an hour. I have. Do you have time for two more questions?
Okay, let's do it.
Okay, so this is the second to last question. What would you say to a young professional who wants to try something new and pivot in their career?
Um, I would say the first thing they should do is figure out what their why is.
Mhm.
Um, I think when I look back, there's a through line, right? There's something that connects all of my experiences that makes it easier for me to make the case for the next project. And I do want to say something that even though we are in a maker society and a lot of people are entrepreneurs, not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur. We still need people who work for companies because if everybody's out there building companies, nobody's going to be working in those companies, which means that those companies cannot scale. And it also means that those companies can't touch their communities deeply. So even if, all you're hearing is about entrepreneurship, hustle, blah, 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 there is still need for people who are passionate about being part of something and bringing themselves, their whole selves to, a greater project and a greater vision. So I wanted to make sure I say that so that, people don't feel like, man, I don't belong in this conversation. Everyone belongs in this conversation. But I do think that no matter if your next pivot is a new job or a new enterprise, it's still important for you to know why you're making the pivot because transitions are difficult and there will be a period of time that will be turbulent and frustrating. You will inevitably have to go through trials and tribulations. And if you don't know why it is you're doing this thing, if you don't know why you're pivoting, it's very easy to give up and be discouraged. And I think it also helps other people help you. So, like, if you have family and friends who you're telling, hey, I'm really excited about this pivot or this new direction, and this is why I'm excited. When you're down and when you're struggling, they can tell you, I believe in you and I believe you can do it because you're passionate about this. This is what you're excited about. They can help you and remind you, why it is you're on this journey. So, I think that that's really important as cheesy and cliche as it is, the emotions are what gets us through these things. It's not sort of like the how to's. You can give somebody a step by step, but if they're not excited or interested in it, they won't take the steps.
Yes, yes. And I really appreciate you taking a moment to invite everyone into the conversation because it's true. Folks who are going to be listening to this podcast are people, a lot of them are just starting within their careers. They're just beginning to take those first steps and they're really wondering what's on the other side. And so for us, it's easier to say, okay, well, business ownership, right? But I think it's okay to not feel feel entrepreneurial. It's okay if you're still just figuring it out, if you want to just be a part of something meaningful and something that already exists. And but even in that, I think it's important to remember that you can still make your mark and you can still make
Hmm.
your own unique impact. So just because you are supporting and building a dream that someone else began doesn't mean that your ideas and your dream is any less valuable, right?
Right.
Okay, and then our final question, and this is the question we ask all the guests who comes onto our show, is what? Or let me back up. So the final question is, how would you describe success?
Oof. Okay. Um, I think for me, there's this feeling that you've had an impact. Um, because there's so many different ways you can make money that like don't require you to do anything. Like there are really silly ways you can make money, there are really dumb ways you can make money, really hard ways, right? So I feel like money is not always the best indicator because it can come in many different ways. But I think that um we all want to leave something behind. We all want to have some kind of legacy. And when I say legacy, legacy is, is as much about building a business as it is raising a human being that is going to be kind and generous. So legacy can be anything. And I think that that's why success can't be about money, because your legacy could be and your success could be working in a company where people feel heard and they feel empowered, and that could be success to you. And for me, it could be seeing an entrepreneur leverage their trademark or their patent in a way that allows them to, create generational wealth for their family or their community. So for me, it's about impact. It's about some kind of long lasting imprint that you've left on other people that makes the world a little bit brighter and a little bit better and a little bit warmer.
I love that. Impact. And with that, I want to thank you for coming on the show, for sharing the space with us, for sharing your insight. You are truly brilliant. And just listening to you talk, I learned so much in just these few minutes. And I'm sure that our guests have also learned something from you today. But before you go, I want to show my gratitude. I do call this a mini web series game show, and there are prizes on this show. So, this I am going to be sending to you. It is a tech pouch, a tech. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, this is one of my latest ventures. Let me see if I can. Okay, here we go. Basically,
Ooh,
yeah, you won't enjoy this. Okay, this is my new life hack. It looks very simple, but I promise it will change your life. Cables on this side, couple charging blocks. Put your phone in there. Put some more text. Look, you already, you're already ready. You
go
already
on ahead, send it. I'll take it. I'm traveling on Saturday. Gonna get
Yes.
here on time.
Okay. Can we talk about it? Nice little travel loop. Okay. It does come in 6 colors. So I am going to send you those options. You can tell me which one you want, and I will mail this out to you. Um,
Awesome.
how can people learn more about you?
Find me on LinkedIn, my website, ohanelelawfirm.com. I'm not on Instagram right now. I'm sorry, friends. So it's LinkedIn and my website. And then, yeah, just feel free to reach out and connect.
Well, Chinwe, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you again for sharing the space, for staying a little bit longer, and please enjoy your time of rest.
Thank
And
you
with
so
that,
much. It's been a pleasure.
take care. Bye.